So good morning, church. Hey, it's good to be together. Good to see you. I've been away for a couple of weeks, and it's nice to be back together. We are in the book of Hebrews this morning, or the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament. And I think if you're using a pew Bible or a Bible that's out amongst you, it's going to be on page 1213 in the paging of our Bibles. If you're using an electronic device or you're with us virtually, which we're grateful you are, I want to encourage you to use the New International Version simply because that's what I have, and it's good for us just to have the same wording. Makes it easier for us on so many different levels. Now, the letter to the Hebrews is I don't know how to quite word it, but it's a hard text. It's an unusual text. Let me put it that way. Somewhere along the line, probably around the King James time, it got attributed to Paul, though that wasn't historical, and I don't think anybody really believes that Paul wrote it. It has the Greek grammar is brutal. It is hard to translate. There's all these different things with it, but the basic theme is what Valina has put together in a really beautiful way in that insert for you, and I encourage you to look at this insert later today. Just a synopsis of a synopsis is that there was, at this period of time, generation or so after Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension, where Jewish Christians started to face increasing pressure. And there were a number of them, it appears, from reading this letter, who were questioning whether they should just return to Judaism and sort of set Jesus aside, to leave Christ and to go back to what they had, feeling like that would be the safest thing for them with the persecution and all that was happening. And so the letter to the Hebrews is a response to that. And you're going to see a little bit of how that response is in just these 3 verses in the 12th chapter of the letter to the Hebrews. So let's listen for the word of the Lord. Chapter 12, beginning with verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. It's the word of the Lord. So, first Sunday I was at Massanutten with about 160 or 70 of you on a mission trip, and that was absolutely great. We had kids from infants all the way through folks into their 80s and early 90s. Just great time. Last week, our family was on vacation, and we were out on the Outer Banks. And I had a great time as well. But something happened to me in a restaurant that I'm going to be thinking about for a long, long time. So you get to this stage in life where you just start to, you sit down and you get a wait person, and then it becomes kind of like a goal to know something about the wait person. And I know that sounds alien to most of you, but so you kind of chat them up. And when you get to be older, ancient, you can get away with that a lot of times. So this guy came and sat, Cheryl and I, this is just Cheryl and I, we skipped away from everybody. We're sitting for our own little lunch together. And a young guy, turned out to be 22 years old, named Luke. I knew that because of his name tag. And I said, Luke, hey, how are you? Tell me a little bit about you, that kind of stuff. And Luke was very gracious. And he said, well, I just graduated college, and I'm in between. I'm going to join the Army, but I'm in between right now, so I'm doing this for the summer. And I said, great. I said, where'd you go to college? He said, well, I went to a place called Virginia Military Institute. And I said, oh, you went to VMI, and I made the point that, the connection that one of our sons went to VMI, and we've had one of our guys in the church was a rat last year, and, all that kind of stuff. So made those kind of connections with him, and it was just nice. At least for me, it was very, very nice, and he was very, very patient. Each time he'd come, there'd be another question, and all like that. And so we had a meal and paid the bill. And before we could get up and leave, he came back and he said, hey, I've got a question for you. Now, he didn't know what I do and all of that. He said, I've got a question for both of you. He said, I'd like to ask this of people of another generation, which is a very polite way of saying, but some of you could learn from that, Derek. Yeah, others of you could learn from that about how we do this. So I like to ask people of another generation a question. And this is my question. If you could look back and go back to your younger self, meaning how 22 for me, if you could go back to 22, what would you tell your younger self at 22? Now, I'm terrible at those things. I don't think quickly on my feet. I get kind of stuck and all like, so I'm like, oh Lord, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. So I do the perfect thing. I say, Cheryl, why don't you go first? So Cheryl goes. She'll do anything, right? So she starts talking and she's saying something, very meaningful and spiritual and deep and all. I think I wasn't paying a bit of attention to what she was saying because I'm trying to figure out what am I going to say when it comes to my time. And Cheryl talked for a while, but she didn't talk long enough. And so I was like, Cheryl, do you have anything else you want to say? Because I'm still trying to think and I'm terrible at this and it just drives me nuts and I'm not quick and I'm not witty. All those things I'm just not. So comes my time. And I look at him, and I don't have anything to say. And I say, stay faithful. And he looks at me and he says, stay faithful. Yeah, stay faithful. Thank you. Which meant that was absolutely stupid, but I was trained to be really polite to my elders. Stay faithful. So I leave, we walk back to our house, and the whole time I'm thinking, I need to go back there, and I need to get Luke to be my weight person again, because I want to do over. I want to do over, and I want to think it through. I want to figure it out. I want to do over. Okay, I bring all of that up because when I look at the letter to the Hebrews, which is this letter that's talking about people who are being persecuted for loving Jesus, and they're being so persecuted that they're thinking about maybe I just leave Jesus aside and take something that's sort of like, something I know. And all this challenge that they're facing in life and all, there's a what I would say to my younger self in it. And it's in what we heard today. And it's really, I think, probably the most famous line in all of the letter to the Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Now, chapter 12 follows chapter 11, as it does in most books. And chapter 11 is called the Hall of Faith. And chapter 11 is filled with all the people in the Old Testament who lived this life of faith, lived this life of faith, lived this life of faith. And the end of the chapter, it starts talking about all these people that really aren't named, but the people that were persecuted, the people that offered their life, people that are willing to die for Jesus, all that's there. And so when this text says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, there's an incredible comfort in that. There's something, if you've read through the first 11 chapters and you get to this, it's like, whoa. It's so comforting. I don't have to go it alone. I don't have to go it alone. I don't have to go it alone. And then I think of what we want to share with the world today. And we realize that we live in this world that actually we've had Surgeon Generals, whatever, the health people and all, tell us we're in a loneliness epidemic. 30% of folks between the ages of 30 and 44 are either frequently or always lonely. 1 in 4 folks between the age of 18 and 24 are always lonely. And the studies are interesting because they ask people, why do you think you're lonely? And there's a lot of reasons why they think they're lonely. There are all kinds of reasons. But the number one? 73% say that the reason they're lonely, the main reason they're lonely is because of technology. Now, here we go. Got an old guy up here who can really start talking about technology. Back in my day, we had party lines, all that kind of stuff. But the thing about technology that's interesting is, let me come back to it. In Japan, we've got a new book we're using in our for our men's group. And we've got about 100 guys the first Saturday of the month to come here for a breakfast. And we give out a book that we walk through for the coming months. And so we're starting a new one, The Men We Need by Brent Hansen. And a lot of what I'm sharing today, actually, I got from this book by reading it a few times on vacation. He talks about something called the hikokome effect. It's a study in Japan where I think in 2016 actually the Japanese government started measuring this, like in the census, of guys. There's 540,000 that the Japanese government sees and recognizes. The estimates are there are many, many more than that in Japan, between the ages of 19 and 34, who have not left their house in a year and a half or more. The hikokome effect. They're completely and totally reliant on their parents for whatever they get and everything. They haven't left their house for a year and a half or more. Completely reliant, and everything they get is on screen. Right, so there, we can get on the screens again. But the screens aren't new. Well, there's a famous book called The Republic, written by Plato. And Plato is writing this book saying this is what he thinks would be the perfect society. And in book 7 of The Republic, he tells a famous story. It becomes famous because it's his, right? So he tells a story about these guys that are in a cave. And it's a simple story. These guys are in a cave, and they're all strapped down. They're in irons, they're pointing to the back of the cave. So you come in the entrance, they're pointing to the back of the cave, and all they can see is the back wall of the cave, and they're bound. They can't move their heads, they can't move their hands. They're bound. And on the back of the cave, the only thing that they can see are the shadows of what's coming through from the light of the real world, right? So they see the shadows, and that's all they know. That's their reality. That's all they've ever seen in their entire life, are these shadows. Well, lo and behold, one of the guys gets loose, and he gets free, and he goes out, and he realizes that, wow, those are shadows. He didn't even know what a shadow was, right? I mean, that's not real. This is real. He sees the sun, he sees plants, he sees people, he sees all these things, and all this stuff that was there, it's like a shadow, is like, it's real, it's behind us, it's like there, So, being the good guy that he is, he comes back in the cave. And he lets everybody loose, starts letting them loose. And he says, hey guys, you're not going to believe this, but everything we think is like this, there's something that's better. I mean, it's different. It's like this is just shadows, but there's something, it's just amazing. So he lets them loose, and then Plato says, but the sadness is that none of them turned back to see what was real. They're used to the shadows. They like the shadows. It's all they know. It's their experience. These screens that we can look at it and say, oh, look at, folks that are digital natives and all that. That's not new. We've been trading shadows for reality from the very, very beginning of time. And so here's the real challenge for us is that, we come to recognize that to be together is great. We don't go it alone. We're surrounded, right? We're by these, but togetherness isn't enough. There needs to be something else besides simple togetherness. Hansen tells the story that I've gone a deep dive on this thing because I've just been found fascinating about it. And I don't know, because I read a lot of stuff and I'd never heard this before. But something called mouse utopia. I don't know if anybody's heard of mouse utopia. It comes from a guy named John B. Calhoun, who in the late 60s, this isn't recent, he did this fascinating thing where he created a perfect world for mice. Big, huge, perfect world for mice. And he had it where they had fresh water, they had fresh food, their bedding got changed every day, they had all the space they could handle. It could handle like 25,000 mice, and he puts 4 pair in there. And boom, like mice do what mice do, kind of like what rabbits do. I mean, like within the first month and a half, it's doubled, it's doubled, it's doubled, it's doubled. And he gets up to this relatively significant number. And then he starts to recognize somewhere around day 300, something starts to change. Now you got a few thousand, whatever, mice in there. And he starts to notice that many of the male mice start to gang up with each other. And they start to become violent towards the other male mice. And a Lord of the Flies kind of thing, right? And then he looks at the female mice and he starts to recognize that some of the female mice are they're starting to isolate, and they're pulling off, and they're separating their babies out from everyone else. And then ultimately he starts to realize that they start to cannibalize their own babies. And then he looks at the one that everybody talks about. He looks at the one he calls the beautiful ones. And people have studied this on and on and on after this. The beautiful ones are the ones that have pulled themselves off. They're living completely alone by themselves, and they're preening themselves all day. It's like they're looking in a mirror and putting on mouse lipstick. I mean, they're preening themselves. They're all about themselves. And so he's like, this thing goes on. And then he starts to recognize that it takes from that moment forward, it doesn't take long before he starts to see there's fewer mice. And the reproduction rate starts to go down. And they're not reproducing and all. But it's everything, fresh water, fresh food, plenty of space. Their bedding is changed every day. It's a utopia. It's a perfect world. And then ultimately, it doesn't take that long before all of them die. And we look at it and we think, wow, well, that's just a really interesting mouse story, Jim. Look at the fall of the Roman Empire. And you want one of the clear markers of the fall of the Roman Empire? It's when the reproduction rates started to go down, because it becomes about us, not about someone else. You might even look at the reproduction rates in our, I'll leave that, right? Now, he calls this behavioral sink. And people have talked about it and studied it and tried to refute it and all this kind of stuff, but it makes perfect sense to me because, you see, if there's no work, if there's no purpose to life, if it's only about perfect utopia for me, like what makes me happy, like every day is a vacation, you know, Pitbull can sing it, but it's like if it's like every day is that, then there's nothing. That's why for us in this book, the very first two people, Adam and Eve, we call them, they had work to do. God put them in the garden and said, I want you to have dominion. Dominion's not control. I want you to nurture. I want you to care. I want you to name the animals. I want you to live off of what is here. I want you to forage for your food. I want you to care for things. He gives them work to do. Because without a purpose, everything falls apart. That's the myth of utopia. And so what we find in this passage is, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. He tells us to do something. Let's not just be together. Let's not to be safe with each other. Let's not just come together and be like, wow, it's cool that we're here. But let us do something. Let us throw off what hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race that is marked for us. Let us do something. Let us do something. But it's not just do something. Let us do something specific. Let us throw off, let us run. He's using athletic imagery. He's using like the Olympic and the Corinthian Games imagery. Let us throw off the, what slows us down. Let us, as our children, Suzanne did with our kids this morning, let us run with. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. It's so exciting to me, is that our purpose is not simply to be together. Yeah, no, it's a great cloud of witnesses, but it's a great cloud of witnesses for our purpose. And yes, we've got something to do. We can become like athletes for the kingdom. Like, yeah, we throw off and we run. But the key is fixing our eyes on Jesus, who himself had his eyes set on something. The joy set before him. He endured the cross, the suffering, the pain that you're going to, as a follower of Jesus, the writer of Hebrews is saying, all that stuff that's going to happen to you, Jesus went through. And you know what he saw it as? He saw it as joy. Or he saw what was coming as joy. And it didn't deter him. And so it can be for us. And then I start to think about, what is this joy? Like, wow, what is joy? And joy, I think, is who Jesus is, what Jesus sees. I think ultimately we say it's love. And Hansen does a really great job in this, talking about what love is. He says, and I think he's spot on, is that in our world, in our context, when we use the word love, it's almost always about myself when I use it. I love ice cream. I love to read. I love Plato's Republic. I loved someone. I fell in love with her. I love someone. And if we're not careful, all of those things start to become the same thing because they're all about me, and it becomes this love that is always a consumer. What am I getting from it? What am I receiving from it? And it's so easy when I'm not getting anything from it, when I no longer like chocolate ice cream, then I just kind of move on. Or when I'm no longer in love with her or with him. It's just easy. But this love of Jesus is a love that is set with the joy that he knows. So there's a story that I've used a number of times with you. It's been used probably 1,000,000 times or more, so this is 1,000,001. And it comes from a book by a guy named Richard Selzer. Richard Selzer was a surgeon and an instructor at Yale. And he wrote a classic book called The Mortal Lessons, Notes on the Art of Surgery. And he says this: I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted and palsied, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. The surgeon had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut the little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they? I ask myself. He and this wry mouth I have made, who gaze at and touch each other so generously, greedily. The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this, she asks. Yes, I say, it will. It's because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. All at once I know who he is. I understand. And I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with a God. Unmindful, he bends to kiss her crooked mouth. And I, so close, I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate to hers, to show her that their kiss still works. A woman is not a product to be consumed. For the men that are here, if you use the word love and you tell someone that you love her, remember this. At the very heart of love, real love is security. It means I choose you, and I will not stop choosing you. I will not abandon you. No matter what, this kiss will always work. That's a beautiful romantic story. But for the Christian, it's so much more. You know one of the ways that we were identified as being believers and followers of Jesus Christ? These are people who are living the Christian faith and they're starting to be persecuted for it and they just want to go back and be Jews and have a bunch of laws. You know one of the reasons we were identified, one of the tells, we were called when we greeted other Christians to greet them with the holy kiss. An open mouth kiss of another follower of Jesus. It was to exchange the Spirit, the breath of God. And it is the same for us today. a holy kiss for this world. I went back twice to that restaurant to try to get Luke to be my wait person again, because I wanted a do-over. He never even made eye contact at our table. He's too busy with other people. But I tell you what, if I could have a do-over with Luke, this is what I would say. Luke, you getting ready to go into the army? You got your whole world, all that stuff, yeah. Every day can be a holy kiss day. Because the truth is, every single day we live, we either bless or we curse the people we're around. Every day. Every day is an opportunity for it to be a holy kiss of love, and grace, and hope, and promise. And we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses who've done that, who've lived that. Many names here in this very room who should be written in that same text. Claim that. Form your life in a way where your kiss conforms to the crooked face of the world. So that when you meet it, you can actually change it. If you claim that, you will never grow weary or lose heart. Maybe I'll drive to the Outer Banks this week. I don't know. Amen.